Okay, so I thought that I could kind of bring all this back because I kind of went a little off on the pivot and I talked about relationship OCD because someone was asking me about it. It was unrelated to Larry. But if you saw my recent video on relationship OCD, I've been thinking about loops, doubts, and what it means to live with uncertainty. And I thought maybe it'd be interesting to take that energy and some of those concepts and pivot it back into what I love to do, talk about Larry Stylinson and fandom, because there's a question that's been hanging in the air for years, and I think it seems to have made its way back because of some of the stunting. And it's this question: what if Harry Styles and Louis Tomlinson really have been together all along? What if, against all odds, they've been married since September 28th, 2012? I think that's the date. Someone tell me if I'm wrong. And here's the kicker: what if all the denials, the shade, the you Larrys are delusional moments, all the times we thought the boys, or really their PR teams were breaking our hearts by saying that we were reading into things, we were imagining things. What if that was all part of protecting their bond? Would I be angry? Would I feel lied to? No, I would not be angry. Would I feel lied to? Maybe. But if you ask me this question in unison, would I be angry because I felt I was lied to? The answer is absolutely not. I would be so happy to learn I believed. I'd be so happy to learn that I didn't believe a lie, or that at one point I believed a false story that they weren't together. I would love them even more, and here is why. All right, the weight of the lie. So let's be real. Nobody likes being misled. In those situations, finding out you were lied to feels like betrayal. But Larry is an example of a very rare exception. So, for more than a decade, since the band went on hiatus, fans have suffered through cycles of hope and heartbreak. Seeing Harry's eyes linger on Louis, catching Louis' smiles at Harry's jokes, and hearing songs that sounded too pointed, too raw, to not be about each other. And then whiplash, a denial, a girlfriend rolled out, a lyric dismissed as coincidence. This is the cycle that has exhausted the fandom. And if you've been here long enough, I'm not a veteran Larry, I admit, but for the veteran Larrys, you know the pain of thinking, did I imagine it? Did I project too much? Because sometimes doubt creeps in, and every once in a while there's chatter on Reddit, right? And there's chatter on social media about, oh, I'm really upset that this has happened. But imagine this: instead of betrayal, those denials were armor, a protective layer, a necessary veil so their truth could survive. So there's that hypothesis of September 28, 2012 being their anniversary. And then for years, whispers in the fandom point to this one date. The theory goes that Harry and Louis, under pressure from every side, quietly formalized what the world would not allow. They married. Maybe not in a way that the law would easily recognize back then, because there was that tweet, we don't need a piece of paper. I think it was Harry that tweeted that one. Or Louis tweeted something about going to New York because gay marriage was legalized. But in a way, that mattered to them. So think about it. The tattoos that started lining up, the lyrical parallels about anchors, compasses, home, the sudden clampdowns in public interactions. It all syncs. It all points to something seismic shifting around that time. If that is true, then every denial was not a wall against us. It was a shield for them. And why would I celebrate being lied to? Well, normally lies destroy trust, but sometimes the truth hidden behind a lie is the most life-affirming thing you could discover. If I found out that Harry and Louis spent the last 13 years happily married, happy and happily married, and supporting each other through fame, contracts, and scrutiny, I would literally cry tears of joy. Because here's the reality. Larrys have carried the burden of imagining Harry and Louis as tragic, star-crossed lovers at times, pulled apart by the machine. We've pictured them lonely, isolated, punished for their bond. And that's why so many of us have felt blue sometimes. The weight of all that heartbreak. We empathize with these two. Clever Larrys. But if the lie was really a cocoon, if all along they were building a safe life together, laughing behind closed doors, celebrating anniversaries while the world saw shadows, that's not betrayal. That's survival. That's love. And I would be so glad I was wrong. The truth does set you free. There's that saying, but sometimes the truth looks like a lie until it finally comes out. So imagine it. All the denials dissolve, all the confusion clears, the fandom realizes it was not for nothing. We weren't crazy as Larrys. We were definitely not delusional as Larrys. We Larrys were right. And the boys? They weren't broken. They were not casualties of the gods above. They were victors because they found a way. And that's why I would celebrate the lie, because it would mean the suffering was not real, at least not in the way we feared. The heartbreak was projection, the love was constant. So if one day Harry and Louis sit down, look us in the eye on like this exclusive interview, like on BBC or whatever it is, and say, yes, we've been married since 2012. Yes, we denied it to protect ourselves. And yes, we misled you. I personally would smile, I would laugh, I would say, thank you. Thank you for proving love can outlast the machine. And I would love them more than ever. Because this would be the one of the few times in my life where being lied to would be the sweetest gift. The truth hidden inside would be the truth that finally sets us free. So until then, we wait, we hope, and we carry the bond forward, not as a wound, but as a possibility. So, what do you think? How would you react if basically, guess what? You've been quote unquote misled all these years and they've been happily married. Would you be set? Would you be Jubilee? I'd be Jubilee. Because there was an earlier video I did where it talked about the Tony and Ziva arc from NCIS, and that it was part of like a series of like how to understand secrecy and love. And then the very first series was about also NCIS, and it was the Tony and Jean arc. And I relate how I'd respond if these two finally said, "Hey, guess what? We've been married all along. We've been like going on like we've been renewing our vows every year with Elton John and David Furnish." Oh my God, I'd be so happy. But if you think of the Tony and Jean arc, it is through that lens that I am saying this, because Jean did not know that what was Tony's last name? Okay, so Tony was Tony, but then when he was undercover, his last name switched, right? So up until the very end, Jean did not know that Tony was a different Tony. I think she thought he was some kind of like professor or something. She did not know that he was an NCIS agent. And then if I'm remembering the storyline correctly, because it's been a while since I saw those episodes, but when she found out Tony's real identity, his name really was Tony, just the last name was different, right? The only thing that mattered to Jean was it real? Everything else was secondary, if not tertiary. Like, that's what I'm getting at. Is at the end of the day, the most important thing was that the bond survived, right? So I look at it this way. So if hypothetically, if I was, say, in Jean's shoes and I thought that somebody, say I had a Tony and his name was Tony, but he wasn't really Tony. But if, say, I was led to believe that Tony was this way, and maybe there was, similar to Larry, a bit of a tragic arc in the storyline of like, a man that was down on his luck and then just disappeared because he just fell through the cracks, kind of thing. And you didn't get any idea, like, did they land on their feet? Like, nothing, right? And you go for years, maybe just hoping that they were okay, right? Or just not knowing how to file that story away, or just always in the back of your mind thinking, God, I hope that they made it, because there's literally no way to find out. Because someone falls through the crack, they can literally have no paper trail. Like that can still happen. And yeah, so if I liken it to why I would feel such a joy if it's confirmed that these two have been lovebirds forever, they were never parted, and even though we've not seen a photo of them, that doesn't mean anything. It would land on me in this way. If I give it a metaphor to say the Tony and Jean kind of storyline, if I for years thought that somebody had really was in a bad place, and I lived with some heaviness in the back of my mind or in the bottom of my heart that, oh my God, I hope they're okay, right? And I found out that it was a case like the Tony and John storyline, that guess what? Smile, you're on candid camera. That person wasn't who you thought they were. They are Tony though. That doesn't change. That's their name. But they were never at risk. They were never at risk. They were fine. Uh, the story wasn't quite accurate, and in a lot of ways, it was far from accurate. But ultimately, the fundamentally most important issue or concern, they were never at risk of falling through the cracks. They were always fine. They never went hungry. They didn't fall through the cracks. They didn't get sick and have nowhere to go. They were never out in the rain without shelter. If, if I found out that the lie confirmed to me that just like Larry, they were always okay and more than okay and actually not broken, but actually quite strong, then oh my God, that is the level of joy I would feel. Because if you love somebody, I mean, we don't know Harry and Louis, but we love their love story. But if you love someone, you care that they're okay.